The man holding a sword to Ilyan's throat was his husband, and according to the novel, Ilyan had only 7 days left to live. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell me in the comments what you would do if you woke up married to the most dangerous man in the Empire. Part 1. The husband destined to kill me. Ilyan Veradis opened his eyes beneath a black silk canopy. Cold steel touched his skin. A tall man stood beside the bed dressed in a blood-stained military uniform. Rainwater clung to his black hair, and a thin scar crossed his left eyebrow. His face was beautiful, but there was no warmth in his silver eyes. Ilyan recognized him instantly. General Kaelor Ravaryn, the undefeated war god of the Avarenth Empire, and the man who would murder his husband 7 days after returning from war. Ilyan's heart nearly stopped. Yesterday he had been a 26-year-old editor, reading a poorly written romance novel on his way home. He remembered complaining about its foolish villain Ilyan Veradis, who married Kaelor for status, and then betrayed him to the crown prince. A moment later a speeding car had appeared. Now he was inside that very novel. Worse still, he had become its doomed villain. Kaelor pressed the blade closer. "Give me one reason not to kill you." Ilyan forced himself to breathe. In the original story, Kaelor returned from the Northern War to discover that his husband had sold military secrets to Crown Prince Othriel. Ilyan denied everything, then attempted to poison Kaelor before fleeing with jewels from the estate. He never made it past the gates. Kaelor caught him and ended their miserable marriage with one stroke of his sword. But that execution was supposed to happen in 7 days. Why was the sword already here? "I was wondering the same thing," Ilyan whispered. Kaelor's gaze sharpened. "What? Why, you have not killed me?" The general looked briefly surprised. Ilyan slowly raised both hands. "If you came here with proof of my betrayal, then use the sword. If you came only because someone accused me, then killing me now will give the true traitor exactly what he wants." Silence filled the dark chamber. Thunder rolled beyond the windows. Kaelor withdrew the blade by an inch, but did not lower it. "You expect me to believe you are innocent?" "No. I expect you to investigate." In the novel, Ilyan had begged for mercy. That had only made Kaelor despise him more. This time Ilyan would not beg. He needed to become useful before the plot crushed him. Kaelor studied his face as though searching for deception. "You sent 6 letters to the Crown Prince." "I did." "You met his agent 3 nights ago." "I did." "And yesterday a map of our northern defenses disappeared." Ilyan's stomach tightened. He remembered this part. The original Ilyan had secretly worked for Othriel, but the missing map was not among the information he had sold. A servant named Tovin had stolen it on the orders of Duke Sereth. The map contained false defensive positions. Kaelor had created it to expose a spy. If Ilyan revealed too much, he would look even more suspicious. "The map has a red seal shaped like a wolf," Ilyan said carefully. "Search the east stable before sunrise. Look beneath the stones under the 3rd stall." Kaelor went completely still. Only he and 2 trusted officers knew what seal had been placed on the false map. "How do you know that?" Ilyan swallowed. "Let me survive until morning and I will explain." "You are bargaining with your life. It is the only thing I own that you have not already taken." Something changed in Kaelor's expression. The blade finally moved away. Kaelor seized Ilyan's wrist instead. His grip was firm and burning hot. Beneath the general's glove, Ilyan felt an uneven tremor. In the novel, Kaelor had returned victorious but badly wounded. He hid the injury because the Emperor's court would tear apart any commander who showed weakness. A dark patch of blood spread beneath his uniform. "You are hurt," Ilyan said. Kaelor released him at once. "That is none of your concern. It will become my concern if you collapse in my bedroom, and everyone claims I murdered you." Ilyan climbed out of bed. His legs nearly failed beneath him, but he remained standing. "Sit down." Kaelor gave him a dangerous look. "Was that an order?" "It was advice from the only person in this room who does not want you dead." For the first time the feared war god seemed uncertain. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor. Kaelor reacted instantly. He pulled Ilyan behind him and lifted his sword toward the door. The handle turned. A servant entered carrying a silver tray. His eyes widened at the sight of Kaelor, then dropped toward the cup he held. Ilyan recognized him. Tovin. The real spy. My lord, Tovin stammered. I brought his grace his evening medicine. Kaelor's body tensed. Ilyan stared at the steaming cup. In the original novel, the poison that killed Kaelor's favorite captain had been hidden inside that medicine. Ilyan had been blamed because the cup came from his private kitchen. Do not drink it, Ilyan said. Tovin suddenly threw the tray. The cup shattered against the floor and released a sharp bitter scent. Kaelor pushed Ilyan aside as Tovin drew a dagger. Steel flashed once. The servant fell with Kaelor's sword against his throat. Who sent you? Kaelor demanded. Tovin smiled. Then he bit down hard. Blood ran from his mouth before Kaelor could stop him. Within seconds the servant was dead. Ilyan stared at the body in horror. The story had already changed. Tovin was not supposed to die yet. Kaelor turned toward Ilyan with suspicion burning in his eyes. You knew. I knew he was dangerous. You knew about the map. You knew about the poison. Either you are part of this conspiracy, or someone has told you every move they intend to make. Ilyan had no answer that would not make him sound insane. Kaelor stepped closer. Before he could speak, his face lost its color. His sword slipped from his hand and struck the floor. Ilyan caught him before he fell. Kaelor was heavier than expected. His breath burned against Ilyan's neck as Ilyan lowered him onto the bed. Blood now covered the general's side. You should leave me, Kaelor murmured. If I die tonight you will finally be free. Ilyan tore open the blood-stained uniform and found a deep wound beneath the general's ribs. I do not want freedom bought with your death. Kaelor looked at him, as if those words had hurt more than the wound. Ilyan began wrapping the injury with clean linen. His hands shook, but he refused to stop. He knew Kaelor was watching him. This marriage had always been empty. The original Ilyan feared Kaelor, while Kaelor treated him like a political obligation. They had shared a mansion for 2 years, but had never shared trust. Tonight was the first time either of them had protected the other. When the bleeding slowed, Kaelor caught Ilyan's hand. If the map is where you claim, then you live, he said weakly. But you will remain beside me until I learn the truth. Ilyan met his silver eyes. Is that a promise or a threat? Kaelor's fingers tightened around his. Both. A horn suddenly sounded beyond the estate walls. Once. Twice. Then a third time. Kaelor's expression turned grim. That signal means the palace guard has surrounded the mansion. Someone pounded on the chamber door. General Ravaryn, a voice called. By order of Crown Prince Othriel, you and your husband are under arrest for treason. Ilyan looked at Kaelor. In the original novel, the arrest never happened. The plot was no longer following the book. Whatever waited outside wanted both husbands dead. End of Part 1. Part 2. The escape beneath the estate. The pounding on the chamber door grew louder. General Ravaryn, the palace officer called. Open the door or we will enter by force. Kaelor tried to stand, but pain twisted across his face. Blood had already begun soaking through the fresh bandage around his ribs. Ilyan caught his arm. You cannot fight an entire royal guard in this condition. I have fought armies in worse condition. And did those armies surround your bedroom while you were half-dressed? Kaelor looked down at his open uniform, then back at Ilyan. This is hardly the moment to admire me. I was criticizing you. You were staring. The door shook beneath another strike. Ilyan turned away before Kaelor could notice the heat rising to his face. The man was wounded and still managed to be infuriating. In the original novel, the eastern wall of the chamber concealed a passage built by the first Duke of Ravaryn. Ilyan had discovered it while searching the estate for valuables before his attempted escape. If the passage existed, then it would lead beneath the garden and open near the stables. Exactly where the stolen map was hidden. Ilyan hurried toward the fireplace and pressed his hand against the carved stone wolf above it. Nothing happened. Behind him, Kaelor lifted his sword. If this is your escape plan, then I expected something more impressive. Give me a moment. Ilyan searched the carving until his fingers found one slightly raised tooth. He pushed it inward. A narrow section of the wall opened with a low grinding sound. Kaelor stared at the hidden entrance. "How did you know about this?" "I found it while exploring the mansion. That passage has been sealed since my grandfather's death." "Then your servants should clean more carefully." The chamber door cracked. Kaelor grabbed Ilyan and pulled him into the passage. The stone panel closed just as armed guards broke into the room. Darkness swallowed them. The tunnel was too narrow for them to walk side by side. Ilyan moved ahead with one hand against the cold wall, while Kaelor followed close behind. Voices echoed from the chamber. "They cannot have disappeared. Search every room. The Crown Prince wants them alive." Ilyan stopped. Alive was not reassuring. Crown Prince Othriel preferred extracting information before disposing of his enemies. Kaelor collided with Ilyan's back. "Why did you stop?" "The guard said the Crown Prince wants us alive." "I heard them. In the novel he wanted you executed publicly." Kaelor became silent. Ilyan realized what he had said too late. "In what novel?" Kaelor asked. "I said he will want you executed publicly." "No. You said something else." A violent crash sounded behind them as the soldiers discovered the mechanism. Ilyan began moving again. "We can discuss my choice of words after we survive." The passage descended sharply. Kaelor's breathing became heavier with every step, but he never complained. When his foot slipped, Ilyan turned and caught him. For one brief moment they stood pressed together in the darkness. Kaelor's hand rested against Ilyan's waist. "You keep catching me," Kaelor whispered. "You keep falling." "I have never fallen before." Something in his voice made Ilyan's heart beat faster. He pulled away and continued down the tunnel. At the end they found a rusted iron door. Ilyan pushed it open, and cold night air rushed inside. They emerged behind the eastern stable. Rain covered the estate grounds, and dozens of lanterns moved near the mansion. The palace guard was searching every building. "We need the map," Ilyan said. "We need horses. If we leave without proving what I told you, then you will never trust me." Kaelor watched him for a moment, then gave a reluctant nod. They slipped into the stable. The horses shifted nervously as thunder shook the roof. Ilyan counted the stalls until he reached the third. He dropped to his knees and pulled at the stones beneath the straw. The first stone would not move. Neither would the second. His confidence began to vanish. What if the story had changed too much? What if Tovin had moved the map before dying? Kaelor crouched beside him and pushed his fingers beneath the largest stone. Even wounded, he lifted it easily. A leather package lay beneath it. Ilyan released the breath he had been holding. Kaelor opened the package and removed a rolled map marked with a red wolf seal. There was something else inside. A small black ledger. Kaelor opened it and his expression hardened. The pages contained dates and payments connected to military officers throughout the Empire. Beside several entries was Ilyan's signature. Ilyan took the book with shaking hands. "I never signed this." "Your name appears 12 times. It was forged. The Crown will consider this proof that you financed the spies." Ilyan examined the final page. A single payment was scheduled for tomorrow at the abandoned temple outside the capital. This had never appeared in the original novel. Someone was rewriting events around him. A stable door opened. Kaelor immediately pulled Ilyan behind a wooden partition. They pressed close together while 2 palace soldiers entered. "Search every stall," one ordered. "Captain Vaylor believes the general will come for the map." Ilyan looked up at Kaelor. Captain Vaylor Nearest had served beside Kaelor for 8 years. He was Kaelor's oldest friend and most trusted officer. In the original story, Vaylor died after drinking the poison medicine intended for Kaelor. He was never involved in the conspiracy. Unless the story Ilyan remembered had hidden more than he realized. One of the soldiers approached their hiding place. Kaelor silently raised his sword, but his injured arm trembled. Ilyan picked up a loose horseshoe and threw it toward the opposite end of the stable. The sound struck the far wall. Both soldiers turned. Kaelor moved before they could react. He hit the first soldier with the flat of his blade, while Ilyan pulled a saddle blanket over the second man's head. A short struggle followed before Kaelor struck him unconscious. Ilyan stared at the fallen soldiers. That worked better in my mind. Kaelor almost smiled. It transformed his severe face so completely that Ilyan forgot about the dangers surrounding them. Then Kaelor swayed. Ilyan caught him again. The general's skin was burning. "The wound is infected," Ilyan said. "You need a physician. Anyone we approach could be loyal to Othriel. I know someone who is not." In the novel, an elderly healer named Meleys lived near the southern cemetery. She hated the royal family because the former emperor had executed her son. She had once hidden the original Ilyan after his betrayal was exposed. She would help them if they reached her alive. Ilyan prepared 2 horses while Kaelor placed the map and ledger inside his coat. They led the animals through a rear gate and entered the forest before the palace guards noticed them. Rain blurred the road ahead. Kaelor rode beside Ilyan in silence until the lights of the estate disappeared behind the trees. "Who are you?" Kaelor finally asked. Ilyan tightened his grip on the reins. "Your husband." "My husband could not find the dining hall without a servant. Tonight you discovered a hidden passage and exposed an assassin. Perhaps you never knew your husband. Perhaps he never gave me a reason to know him." The words struck deeper than Ilyan expected. Before he could answer, an arrow cut through the rain. Kaelor threw himself from his horse and knocked Ilyan from the saddle. They hit the ground together as more arrows buried themselves in the trees. Masked riders emerged from both sides of the road. Kaelor stood in front of Ilyan despite his wound. Their leader removed his hood. Captain Valar looked at Kaelor with regret. "You should have surrendered at the mansion." Kaelor lifted his sword. "You betrayed me. I saved you for years. Now I am saving the Empire from you." Valar's gaze moved toward Ilyan. "The Crown Prince does not need both of you. Hand over your husband, and I will let you live." Kaelor did not hesitate. He reached behind him and found Ilyan's hand. Then the war god raised his sword against the men he had once commanded. "If you want my husband," Kaelor said, "you will have to walk through me." End of Part 2. Part 3. The War God's Hidden Wound. Kaelor stood between Ilyan and a dozen armed riders. Rain ran down his face while blood dripped from the sword in his hand. His injury had reopened, but his grip remained steady. Captain Valar lowered his weapon. "This is your final chance. Give me Ilyan and walk away." "You know me better than that," Kaelor said. "I knew the man who protected this empire. I do not recognize the man willing to become a traitor for a husband who sold him to the crown." Kaelor glanced back at Ilyan. The doubt in his silver eyes lasted only a moment, but it was enough to hurt. Ilyan stepped out from behind him. "You want the ledger?" Valar's expression changed. "That ledger contains the names of everyone involved in the conspiracy," Ilyan continued. "If you kill us, you may never find where we hid it." Kaelor spoke without looking at him. "We did not hide it." "I know. It is inside my coat." "I know that too." Valar raised his hand, and the masked riders drew their bows. "Search their bodies after they are dead." Kaelor grabbed Ilyan and threw them both behind a fallen tree as the arrows flew. Wood splintered above their heads. "You are terrible at bargaining," Kaelor said. "I distracted them. For 3 seconds. Then use them." Kaelor looked toward their horses. They were frightened but had not fled. Beyond them the road curved toward an old stone bridge. Ilyan remembered that bridge from the novel. It crossed a narrow ravine and had collapsed during Crown Prince Othriel's pursuit of a rebel commander. But that event was not supposed to happen for another month. "We need to reach the bridge," Ilyan said. "There are 12 men between us and the horses." "Only 11. Kaelor looked over the tree. One rider lay on the ground with an arrow in his shoulder. In the confusion, Valar's men had struck one of their own. Kaelor almost laughed. "You truly are counting. I prefer knowing exactly how many people want me dead." Kaelor removed the ledger from his coat and pushed it into Ilyan's hands. "When I move, run toward the horses. I am not leaving you." That was not a request. Then stop giving me orders as if I am one of your soldiers. Kaelor's eyes darkened. You are my husband. Then act like we are partners. Another arrow struck the tree. Kaelor stared at him for one breath then nodded. Stay close. He rose and charged. The weakened general moved with terrifying precision. His sword knocked aside the first attacker before the man could release his arrow. Kaelor pulled the rider from his saddle and turned the horse toward Ilyan. Ilyan ran. Kaelor rushed forward to intercept him, but Ilyan threw the black ledger into the mud between them. Kaelor stopped instinctively. That single hesitation gave Ilyan enough time to reach the horse. Kaelor climbed behind him and seized the reins. His chest pressed against Ilyan's back as the horse raced toward the bridge. You dropped our only evidence, Kaelor said. I dropped Duke Saratha's accounting ledger from the stable office. Kaelor looked behind them. Kaelor had opened the false book and realized the deception. You exchanged them? While you were knocking out the soldiers. A quiet sound escaped Kaelor. This time Ilyan was certain it was laughter. You continue to surprise me. The riders followed them through the forest. When they reached the bridge, Ilyan saw deep cracks running between the stones. The storm had weakened its ancient supports. Kaelor drove the horse across. They reached the other side moments before Kaelor and his men entered the bridge. Ilyan pulled a small metal object from his sleeve. It was the horseshoe he had taken from the stable. What are you doing? Kaelor asked. Ilyan struck the rusted locking pin beside the bridge support. Once. Twice. The pin broke. The central stones shifted beneath the riders. Kaelor leaped from his horse as part of the bridge collapsed into the ravine. Several men retreated while the others became trapped on the opposite side. Kaelor stood among the falling stones and stared at Ilyan. The Crown Prince will find you, he shouted. You cannot change what you are. Kaelor urged the horse into the trees before Ilyan could respond. They rode until the sounds of pursuit disappeared. The storm weakened near dawn. Maelys lived in a stone cottage beside the southern cemetery. When she opened her door, she took one look at Kaelor and stepped aside. I always wondered which of you would bring trouble to my home first, she said. Ilyan helped Kaelor inside. You know us? I delivered you into this world 26 years ago, Maelys told Ilyan. And I removed an arrow from your husband 3 winters ago. Neither experience was pleasant. Kaelor collapsed before reaching the bed. Maelys ordered Ilyan to boil water, while she cut away the blood-stained bandage. The wound was deeper than Ilyan had realized. Dark lines spread beneath Kaelor's skin. Maelys touched one of them and frowned. This is not an infection. Then what is it? Ilyan asked. Poison. Ilyan's blood turned cold. The poison medicine shattered. He never drank it. This poison has been inside him for months. Maelys opened a wooden case filled with small bottles. She mixed several herbs then poured the liquid between Kaelor's lips. It was given in tiny amounts, she explained. Enough to weaken him without attracting attention. The wound accelerated its effect. How long does he have? If I cannot identify the poison, then 3 days. Perhaps less. Ilyan sat beside the bed. In the novel, Kaelor had remained powerful until the final battle. There had been no mention of a slow poison, or the illness hidden beneath his uniform. How much of the original story had been a lie? Hours passed before Kaelor opened his eyes. His hand immediately reached for the sword beside the bed, but stopped when he saw Ilyan. You stayed. Ilyan felt a strange ache in his chest. Did you expect me to leave? That is what you always wanted. I do not remember you ever asking me to stay. Kaelor looked away. Our marriage began as an agreement. I did not think affection was part of it. Then why did you protect me from Kaelor? Kaelor remained silent for so long that Ilyan thought he would refuse to answer. Finally his gaze returned to Ilyan. Because I did not marry you for an agreement. Ilyan forgot how to breathe. Kaelor's fingers moved across the blanket until they touched his hand. 3 years ago, Crown Prince Othriel demanded that your father send you to the palace. You would have become his possession. I offered marriage before your father could accept. The original Ilyan never knew that, Ilyan whispered. Kaelor's eyes narrowed. Again you speak as if you are someone else. Before Ilyan could answer, Melis entered carrying an old wooden box. I found the poison, she said. It is called Widow's Thorn. Only the royal apothecary knows how to prepare it. A sharp crack came from the window. Kaelor pulled Ilyan down as a crossbow bolt shattered the glass. The bolt struck the wall with a folded letter tied around it. Melis removed the letter and handed it to Ilyan. Only one sentence had been written inside. Come to the abandoned temple alone tomorrow night if you want the antidote. Beneath the message was the golden seal of Crown Prince Othriel. Kaelor took the letter and tore it in half. You are not going. Ilyan looked at the dark poison spreading beneath his husband's skin. For the first time since entering the novel, he understood what he feared more than his own death. Losing Kaelor. End of Part 3. Part 4. The Price of the Antidote. Kaelor burned the Crown Prince's letter in the fireplace. Ilyan watched the golden seal curl into ash. That was our only invitation. It was a trap. Of course it was a trap. Othriel is not offering us tea. You are still not going. Kaelor tried to rise from the bed, but his strength failed. Ilyan pressed a hand against his shoulder and forced him back. You can barely stand. And you have never held a sword. I survived meeting you. Kaelor caught Ilyan's wrist. That is exactly why I will not allow you to face him alone. The anger in his voice could not hide his fear. Ilyan sat beside him. Then help me create a plan. Kaelor studied him for a long moment. You truly intend to save me? You protected me when handing me over would have saved you. That was different. How? Kaelor's fingers loosened around his wrist, but did not release him. Because losing you was never an acceptable choice. The room became painfully quiet. Ilyan remembered the cold husband described in the novel. That Kaelor had never smiled, and had felt nothing when he executed his traitorous spouse. Yet the man before him had married Ilyan to protect him from the Crown Prince. He had stood against his own soldiers for him. He was dying and still feared for Ilyan's life more than his own. The novel had never understood Kaelor. Perhaps it had never understood Ilyan either. Melis entered carrying a small pouch. This will slow the poison until tomorrow night, she said. After that his heart will begin to fail. Kaelor accepted the medicine. Is there another cure? Not without the royal formula. Ilyan looked at Kaelor. They both knew what that meant. The abandoned temple stood beyond the southern cemetery. It had one main entrance and several broken windows. Kaelor drew its layout from memory. Othriel will place archers here and here, he said. He will expect you to enter from the eastern path. Then I will enter from the east. Kaelor frowned. He needs to believe I came alone. You and Melis can use the underground burial passage. I cannot fight in my condition. You do not need to fight. You need to stay alive long enough for me to take the antidote. Kaelor gave him an offended look. I dislike this plan. You dislike every plan you did not create. That is because they are usually foolish. This one is only slightly foolish. Despite himself, Kaelor smiled. At sunset, Melis helped Ilyan hide a thin blade inside his sleeve. Kaelor watched from the bed with a dark expression. When Ilyan turned to leave, Kaelor called his name. If anything goes wrong, you run. I thought I was terrible at following orders. I am beginning to notice. Ilyan reached the temple after nightfall. Crown Prince Othriel waited before the ruined altar. He wore a white cloak decorated with golden thread, and looked more like a saint than the man poisoning the Empire's greatest general. 6 armed guards stood around him. A small blue vial rested in his hand. You came, Othriel said. You knew I would. I knew the old Ilyan would. I was not certain about you. Ilyan stopped. What does that mean? Othriel approached slowly. The man I knew was selfish and frightened. He would have begged before entering this temple. You look at me as if you are deciding where to bury my body. Perhaps marriage changed me. Kaelor could not change anyone. That man only knows war. You know nothing about him. Othriel smiled. Now I believe the rumors. The heartless husband has fallen in love. Ilyan forced his attention toward the vial. Give me the antidote. Give me the ledger. Ilyan removed the black book from his coat. Othriel extended his hand. The antidote first. You are in no position to negotiate. Ilyan held the ledger over a burning candle beside the altar. Neither are you. The prince's smile disappeared. He tossed the vial. Ilyan caught it and examined the pale liquid. Meleys had told him the true antidote would turn silver when touched by iron. He drew the hidden blade and placed one drop against it. The liquid remained blue. This is not the antidote. Othriel laughed softly. You have become clever. It makes what comes next almost regrettable. The guards drew their swords. Ilyan moved the ledger closer to the flame. Kill me and every name inside this book burns with me. You still believe those names matter. Othriel removed a folded document from beneath his cloak. It was a letter written in Ilyan's handwriting. I gave you your first task 3 years ago, Othriel said. You agreed to spy on Kaelor before you married him. I remember none of that. That is because you asked Meleys to erase the evidence of your betrayal. Ilyan's pulse quickened. Meleys had nothing to do with it. No. But her son did. Othriel opened the letter. It described secret meetings and payments made before Ilyan's wedding. At the bottom was the same signature found in the ledger. The handwriting was perfect. You wanted Kaelor destroyed, Othriel continued. Then something changed. You discovered why I needed access to the Ravaryn military archives, and attempted to withdraw from our arrangement. What did you do to me? I reminded you that your father's life belonged to the crown. Ilyan understood. The original Ilyan had not betrayed Kaelor for wealth. Othriel had threatened his family and forced him into becoming a spy. The novel had turned a victim into a villain. Where is my father? Alive for now. A sound came from beneath the temple floor. Othriel looked toward the altar. The burial passage opened, and Kaelor emerged with his sword drawn. His face was pale, but his silver eyes were lethal. Meleys followed carrying a crossbow. I told you to remain hidden, Ilyan said. Kaelor moved beside him. I am also terrible at following orders. Othriel's guards attacked. Kaelor met the first blade and drove its owner backward. Meleys fired at another guard, while Ilyan threw the false antidote into a third man's eyes. Chaos filled the temple. Kaelor fought with only one hand. Each movement weakened him, but he refused to retreat from Ilyan's side. Othriel reached beneath his cloak. Ilyan saw the crossbow too late. The prince aimed directly at Kaelor. Ilyan stepped between them. The bolt struck his shoulder and spun him to the ground. Kaelor shouted his name. For one terrible second the war god forgot every enemy around him. Othriel used that moment to escape through the rear entrance. Kaelor dropped beside Ilyan and pulled the bolt free. His hands trembled as he pressed cloth against the wound. You were supposed to run. So were you. Ilyan, stay awake. I am awake. Ilyan tried to smile, but Kaelor's face began to blur. Then Meleys picked up the crossbow bolt and smelled its darkened tip. Her expression filled with horror. This was coated with widow's thorn. Kaelor went still. Ilyan understood before either of them spoke. The same poison killing Kaelor was now running through his own blood. There was only enough time to save one of them. End of Part 4. Part 5. The one he chose to save. The poison spread quickly through Ilyan's body. His wounded shoulder burned, while the rest of him became painfully cold. Kaelor carried him through the burial passage as Meleys searched her bag for medicine. They reached a stone chamber beneath the cemetery. Kaelor lowered Ilyan onto an old wooden table. Save him, he ordered. Meleys placed 2 fingers against Ilyan's neck. The poison has already entered his blood. Then give him the medicine. I prepared only 1 dose. Kaelor understood immediately. The medicine could delay the poison in one of them, but there was no time to prepare more. Ilyan forced his eyes open. Give it to Kaelor. No, Kaelor said. He was poisoned first. And you were struck because of me. Stop arguing and listen. The Empire needs its general. I do not care what the Empire needs. Kaelor took the pouch from Melis. Ilyan tried to move, but his strength disappeared. Kaelor mixed the medicine with water, and lifted the cup toward him. Ilyan turned his face away. If you make me drink that, I will never forgive you. Then you will have to remain alive so you can hate me. Kaelor placed one hand behind Ilyan's neck, and pressed the cup against his lips. Ilyan resisted until Kaelor's voice broke. Please. It was the first time the war god had begged him for anything. Ilyan drank. The darkness took him moments later. When he woke, the chamber was silent. A lantern burned beside the table. His shoulder had been cleaned and bandaged. The terrible cold had faded, but weakness remained in every part of his body. Kaelor sat against the opposite wall with his eyes closed. The dark veins of poison had reached his neck. Ilyan pushed himself upright. You wasted the medicine on me. Kaelor opened his eyes. It was not wasted. You may die because of what you did. I was already dying. Ilyan crossed the chamber and dropped to his knees in front of him. You do not get to decide that your life matters less than mine. Kaelor's face softened. I decided your life mattered more long before tonight. Ilyan looked away. The weight of being someone else inside this body had never felt heavier. Kaelor had loved a man whose face Ilyan now wore. Perhaps every gentle look and every act of protection belonged to the original Ilyan. You do not know me, Ilyan whispered. I know you run toward danger when someone you care about is threatened. I know you speak bravely when you are terrified. I know you count your enemies and hide horseshoes inside your clothes. That does not mean you know everything. Then tell me the rest. Ilyan could not reveal the truth yet. How could he explain another world or a novel that had predicted Kaelor's death? You loved the person I was before, he said. Kaelor shook his head. I wanted him. I protected him. But he never allowed me close enough to love him. The honesty in those words hurt more than a lie would have. Kaelor reached for Ilyan's hand. The man before me now is the one I love. Ilyan's breath caught. You cannot say that while poison is destroying your mind. The poison weakened my body. It did not create my feelings. Ilyan stared at their joined hands. He had entered this world determined to survive. Somewhere between the sword at his throat and the bridge in the rain, his reason for fighting had changed. He no longer wanted a future without Kaelor in it. Ilyan leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief and uncertain. Kaelor went completely still. Ilyan began to pull away, but Kaelor's hand moved behind his neck. Their second kiss was slower. It carried every word they had never been able to say. When they separated, Kaelor rested his forehead against Ilyan's. If I knew poison would make you kiss me, I might have drunk it willingly. Ilyan struck his shoulder. Do not joke about dying. Then give me a reason to live. I just did. A quiet cough came from the entrance. Melis stood there holding the black ledger. I would prefer to interrupt this after finding the antidote rather than before your enemies discover us. Ilyan rose quickly. Did you find anything? The payments in this ledger use a code developed by the Veradis family. She opened the book to a page covered with numbers. Each amount represents a date. The final payment points to the royal apothecary tomorrow, before dawn. The antidote will be there, Ilyan said. Perhaps. Othriel must keep it close if he has been poisoning Kaelor for months. Kaelor attempted to stand. His legs failed beneath him. Ilyan caught him. You are not coming. Kaelor gave him a familiar warning look. This discussion again? You cannot hold a sword. I can still give orders. To whom? The crown has declared your soldiers traitors. A blade appeared at Melis's throat. Captain Valor stepped from the dark passage behind her. 3 armed men followed him into the chamber. Kaelor pushed Ilyan behind him, although he could barely remain standing. Valor lowered his blade. If I intended to kill you, I would have done it while you were occupied. His eyes moved briefly between Kaelor and Ilyan. Ilyan ignored the heat in his face. You tried to kill us on the forest road, he said. I believed Kaelor had stolen the false defense map and planned to overthrow the Emperor. Every piece of evidence carried your signature. And now the Emperor is missing. Kaelor's expression sharpened. What happened? Othriel closed the palace and claimed his father became gravely ill. No physician has been permitted to see him. Valar removed a royal order from his coat. After you escaped the temple, the Crown Prince commanded me to execute my own men. He wanted no witnesses left alive. That convinced you he was the enemy? Ilyan asked. This did. Valar handed him another document. It was an execution order bearing the Crown Prince's seal. 2 names were written across the top: General Kaelor Ravaryn and Lord Ilyan Veradis. Beneath them was a third name: Lord Ilyan Veradis, Ilyan's father. The Crown Prince has your father inside the palace, Valar said. At sunrise all 3 of you will be declared traitors. Your father will be executed publicly even if you are not there. Ilyan's hands tightened around the order. How do we enter the palace? All gates are sealed. 200 royal guards control the walls. Kaelor looked at the 3 soldiers standing behind Valar. And how many men remain loyal to me? 7. 7 against 200, Ilyan said. Kaelor slowly reached for his sword. A dangerous smile appeared on the war god's face. I have one with worse odds. Before anyone could respond, a bell began ringing above the cemetery. Meleys looked toward the ceiling. That is not the morning bell. Valar's face lost its color. It is the execution bell. Ilyan looked at the narrow window. The first light of dawn had not yet appeared. Othriel had moved the execution forward. His father was being taken to the scaffold now. End of Part 5. Part 6. The Execution Bell. The execution bell rang again. Ilyan folded the royal order and placed it inside his coat. We enter through the main gate. Valar stared at him. The guards have orders to kill you. Not if they believe you captured us. Kaelor understood the plan first. You will present us to Othriel as prisoners. I will present Ilyan, Valar said. You can barely walk. No one will believe I captured the war god without injuring him. Kaelor gave him a cold look. I am injured. Not by me. Ilyan stepped between them before the argument could grow. We do not have time. Bind our hands and take us to the palace. Kaelor turned toward him. If this fails, you stay behind me. You can hardly stand. I did not say it would be a strong shield. Ilyan wanted to argue, but the quiet humor in Kaelor's eyes stopped him. Meleys wrapped dark cloth around their wrists, so it appeared they were bound. She concealed a blade beneath Ilyan's sleeve, and poured the last of her medicines into Kaelor's mouth. It will keep you conscious for an hour, she warned. After that the poison will reach your heart. Valar and his soldiers surrounded them as they approached the palace in a stolen prison wagon. Smoke rose from torches along the walls. Citizens had gathered outside despite the early hour. They shouted Ilyan Veradis' name and demanded proof of his crimes. The palace gates opened when the guards recognized Valar. I captured the traitors near the southern cemetery, he announced. The gate captain examined Kaelor. You brought him alive. The Crown Prince requested a public confession. The captain smiled. He will receive one. The wagon entered the palace courtyard. A wooden scaffold had been built before the grand staircase. Ilyan Veradis stood upon it with chains around his hands. Ilyan recognized his father from the novel. Ilyan was a proud man with silver hair and a sharp voice. In the original story he had disowned his son after learning of the betrayal. Now his face was bruised, but he stood without fear. Crown Prince Othriel waited beside him. Hundreds of soldiers filled the courtyard. Kaelor leaned closer to Ilyan. 7 against 200 was optimistic. You said you had one with worse odds. I may have exaggerated to impress you. This is a terrible time to confess that. Valar pushed them toward the scaffold. Othriel's smile vanished when he saw them. You survived the temple. Ilyan raised his bound hands. You wanted us alive. I wanted you desperate. Othriel gestured toward Ilyan. Give me the ledger and your father walks free. Ilyan looked at Ilyan. For a moment confusion crossed his face, as if he sensed that the man wearing his son's face was different. Then his gaze moved toward Kaelor. "Do not trust the prince," Avarenth shouted. "The emperor is imprisoned beneath the throne room." A guard struck him across the mouth. Kaelor's body tensed. Othriel sighed. "My father became too weak to rule. I am protecting the empire from uncertainty." "You are poisoning him too," Ilyan said. The old man refused to name an heir. "You are his only son. His only acknowledged son." A murmur spread through the soldiers. Othriel's eyes hardened. "Enough. The ledger." Ilyan removed it from his coat. The prince approached and reached for the book. Ilyan caught his wrist. Valar drew his sword and pressed it against Othriel's throat. For one heartbeat no one moved. Then Meleys rang the palace fire bell. Smoke poured from the western corridor, where Valar's men had ignited barrels of damp straw. Soldiers rushed toward the false fire. Kaelor tore through his cloth bindings and seized Othriel. "Where is the antidote?" he demanded. Othriel smiled despite the blade at his neck. "You have less time than you think." An arrow flew from the palace roof. Valar pushed Ilyan aside, and the arrow struck his arm. Othriel escaped Kaelor's weakened grip and ran toward the throne room. The courtyard erupted into chaos. Ilyan rushed onto the scaffold and cut his father's chains. Avarenth gripped his shoulders. "What did they do to you?" "I will explain later." "No. Your eyes are different." Ilyan froze. Avarenth reached beneath his torn collar and removed a small brass key. 3 months ago you came to me terrified. You said Othriel had been drugging you, and that parts of your memory were disappearing. He placed the key in Ilyan's hand. "You hid evidence inside the royal apothecary. You told me that if you ever became someone else I should give you this." Ilyan stared at the key. The original Ilyan had known something was happening to him. Perhaps his soul had not simply vanished. Perhaps the poison had destroyed his memories, and the accident in another world had somehow brought them back in a different form. Kaelor staggered beside the scaffold. The dark veins had reached his jaw. Ilyan supported him. "The apothecary is below the eastern tower." They entered the palace through a servant's corridor, while Valar and his men blocked the pursuing guards. Avarenth led them down a spiral staircase to an iron door. Ilyan placed the brass key inside the lock. The royal apothecary smelled of dried herbs and bitter chemicals. Dozens of blue vials covered the shelves. "We need the widow's thorn antidote," Ilyan said. Kaelor fell to one knee. His breathing became shallow. Ilyan searched every cabinet, but the bottles carried no names. "We cannot test all of them." Avarenth looked toward a locked glass case. Inside stood a single silver vial marked with the royal crest. Ilyan shattered the glass with his sword. Meleys entered moments later and examined the liquid. "This is the antidote." Ilyan held it to Kaelor's lips. Kaelor pushed his hand away. "You were poisoned too. The medicine delayed it. It did not cure you. There is enough for both of us." Meleys shook her head. "One dose will barely save him." Kaelor refused to open his mouth. Ilyan caught his face between both hands. "You saved me at the temple. You chose my life in the cemetery. Let me choose yours now. I will not watch you die." "You will not. We will find another dose." Kaelor's eyes closed. Ilyan kissed him and poured the antidote between his lips. Kaelor swallowed instinctively. Moments later his body went still. Ilyan pressed his fingers against Kaelor's neck. There was no heartbeat. "No," Ilyan whispered. "You promised me." Meleys pushed him aside and struck Kaelor's chest. Once. Twice. Kaelor suddenly dragged in a breath. His silver eyes opened. Ilyan pulled him close. "You frightened me." Kaelor's weak arms closed around him. "I heard you." "Heard what?" "You called me back." A horn sounded beyond the palace walls. Valar entered the apothecary, holding his wounded arm. "The northern army has arrived." Kaelor struggled to his feet. "My soldiers came." "They are no longer your soldiers." Valar handed him a message bearing Duke Sereth's seal. The Duke has taken command of the northern legions. He claims you murdered the Emperor and abducted the Crown Prince. That is impossible, Aaron said. Othriel is still inside the palace. A deafening cheer rose from outside. They reached the window in time to see Crown Prince Othriel standing upon the outer wall beside Duke Sereth. A bound man was dragged forward. Emperor Aldrin. Othriel placed a sword against his father's throat. General Ravaryn. His voice echoed across the courtyard. Surrender your husband before sunset, or watch your emperor die. Kaelor looked at Ilyan. The antidote had saved the war god. But the poison inside Ilyan had begun moving again. A dark line appeared beneath his wrist. End of Part 6. Part 7. The Man Behind the Story. Kaelor saw the dark line beneath Ilyan's wrist. The relief in his eyes vanished. The poison is spreading. I still have time. You do not know that. Maelys examined Ilyan's pulse. The medicine is losing its effect. He may survive until midnight if he remains calm. Kaelor looked toward the palace wall where Emperor Aldrin remained beneath Othriel's sword. Then we find another antidote before midnight. Aaron began searching the apothecary shelves. Behind the shattered glass case he found a narrow compartment containing a sealed envelope. The words on its surface were written in Ilyan's handwriting. To the man I may become. Ilyan opened it. The letter described how Crown Prince Othriel had forced him to spy on Kaelor by threatening Aaron. After Ilyan discovered that the Crown Prince was poisoning the Emperor and Kaelor, he began collecting evidence. Othriel found out and ordered the royal apothecary to give Ilyan a drug that slowly destroyed his memories. The final lines made Ilyan's hands tremble. If you are reading this, then I may no longer remember the truth. Trust Kaelor Ravaryn. I was too afraid to tell him what I felt. Do not repeat my mistake. A formula had been written beneath the message. Maelys took the letter. This is the antidote recipe. Can you prepare it? Kaelor asked. I need concentrated widow's thorn extract. The apothecary stored it beneath the military archives. Vaylor checked the corridor. The archives are on the other side of the courtyard. Othriel's soldiers control every entrance. Kaelor looked toward the outer wall. We cannot reach them while the Emperor remains a hostage. Ilyan folded the letter. Othriel demanded that you surrender me. We will give him what he wants. No. It will draw his attention away from the Emperor and the archives. I will not trade your life for a distraction. It is my life. I decide how to use it. Kaelor's jaw tightened. You decided that when you stepped in front of the crossbow. And you decided it when you gave me the medicine. They stared at one another. Ilyan knew Kaelor was not truly angry. He was frightened of losing the person he had only just allowed himself to love. There is something I must tell you before we go, Ilyan said. Kaelor dismissed the others with a look. When they were alone, Ilyan struggled to find the right words. I remember dying in another world. Kaelor remained silent. I woke inside this body with memories of a story. In that story, Ilyan Veradis betrayed you, and you killed him 7 days after returning from war. And that is why you knew about the map and the poison. Yes. Is that also why you believed I could never love you? Ilyan looked down. I thought your feelings belonged to the original Ilyan. I was afraid that if you learned the truth you would see me as a stranger. Kaelor stepped closer. You have his face and perhaps part of his soul. But the man I followed through a collapsing bridge and kissed beneath a cemetery is you. You believe me? I believed you when the entire empire called you a traitor. Kaelor placed Ilyan's hand over his heart. Another world changes nothing. Ilyan's eyes burned. What if I disappear when this story ends? Then I will find whatever world took you. Kaelor kissed him with a tenderness that made the danger outside briefly disappear. When they separated, Ilyan smiled. That sounds impossible. I have one with worse odds. At sunset, Vaylor escorted Ilyan through the palace gates. Ilyan carried the black ledger openly while Kaelor entered the western barracks disguised in a dead guard's uniform. Maelys and Aaron moved toward the archives through the servants' tunnels. Othriel waited upon the outer wall. Duke Sereth stood beside him dressed in the armor of the Northern Army. His gray eyes followed Ilyan with unsettling interest. Emperor Aldrin knelt near the edge with chains around his wrists. "I came alone," Ilyan called. Othriel smiled. "Where is your husband?" "Dying inside the palace." "Then you finally chose the winning side." "I chose my father once. You used that choice to control me. I will not make the same mistake again." Ilyan held up the ledger. "Release the Emperor, and I will give you every name in this book." Othriel gestured toward the soldiers. 2 men pulled Emperor Aldrin away from the edge. Ilyan walked forward. The dark line of poison had reached his elbow. Each breath had become painful, but he kept his expression calm. Othriel took the ledger. Before he could open it, the western barracks exploded into movement. Kaelor's 7 loyal soldiers raised the Ravaryn banner. Vaelor turned against the royal guards, while Erend opened the palace gates from within. Citizens flooded the courtyard. Othriel seized Ilyan and placed a dagger against his throat. "Order them to stop." A voice answered from behind the prince. "He cannot command them." Duke Sereth drew his sword and drove it through Othriel's side. The crown prince released Ilyan in shock. Sereth pulled the blade free and pushed Othriel to the ground. Every soldier on the wall became silent. "You thought this was your rebellion," Sereth said. "You were only its most useful fool." Othriel stared at him. "You served me. I gave you the poison. I forged Ilyan's letters. I placed the idea of the throne inside your empty head." Ilyan understood. Othriel had been cruel, but Duke Sereth had designed the entire conspiracy. The false map and the Black Ledger had always been intended to destroy Kaelor. Othriel would then take the blame while Sereth seized control of the army. Sereth picked up the ledger. "History requires a villain. I chose Ilyan because frightened men are easily misunderstood." The novel had portrayed Ilyan as greedy and Kaelor as heartless, because that was the history Sereth planned to write after they were dead. The story Ilyan had read was not a prediction. It was the villain's version of the truth. Kaelor appeared at the top of the stairs with his sword drawn. "Release my husband." Sereth grabbed Ilyan and pressed his blade against the poisoned wound in his shoulder. "Take another step and he dies." Kaelor stopped. Sereth dragged Ilyan toward the military archives. His soldiers blocked the doorway behind them. Inside the archives, Maelys was preparing the antidote. The widow's thorn extract stood on the table beside her. Sereth struck Maelys and sent the vial across the room. It shattered against the floor. Ilyan stared at the spreading liquid. Their final chance to cure him was gone. Sereth locked the iron doors and knocked over an oil lamp. Flames climbed the shelves filled with military records. Kaelor struck the doors from outside. "Ilyan!" Smoke filled the chamber. Sereth raised his sword while the poison reached Ilyan's heart. "The war god will listen as you die," Sereth said. Ilyan pulled the hidden blade from his sleeve. "No. He will listen as I survive." End of Part 7. Part 8. The Future They Chose. Flames climbed the archive walls. Duke Sereth advanced through the smoke with his sword raised. Ilyan could barely feel the blade in his own hand. The poison tightened around his heart while blood ran from his shoulder. "You were supposed to die as a traitor," Sereth said. "I have already read that ending." Ilyan moved first. His hidden blade struck Sereth's sword and turned it away. Sereth responded with a powerful blow that sent Ilyan crashing against a table. Kaelor struck the iron doors from outside. "Ilyan, answer me. I am still alive. Move away from the doors." Ilyan rolled aside as Kaelor drove a heavy ceremonial spear through the weakened lock. The doors shook but remained closed. Sereth attacked again. Ilyan blocked the sword but pain tore through his chest. His knees hit the floor. "You cannot defeat me," Sereth said. "I do not need to." Ilyan looked past him. Maelys had regained consciousness. She crawled toward the broken vial and carefully collected the remaining drops of widow's thorn extract with a strip of cloth. Sereth followed Ilyan's gaze. He raised his sword to kill her. Ilyan threw his blade. It struck Sereth's shoulder and knocked him backward. Kaelor hit the doors again. The lock broke. The war god entered through the flames. He saw Ilyan on the floor, and something cold entered his expression. Sareth pulled the blade from his shoulder. You cannot kill me. My soldiers control the capital. They followed you because they believed I murdered the Emperor. Kaelor stepped aside. Emperor Aldrin stood in the doorway supported by Valar and Erend. The surviving guards lowered their weapons. Saretha's confidence finally broke. The Emperor is weak, he shouted. The Empire needs someone capable of ruling it. You poisoned your ruler and blamed innocent men, Kaelor said. That is not strength. Sareth lunged. Their swords collided. Kaelor had only recently escaped death, but he fought with the force of a man who had finally found something worth returning to. Sareth attacked without restraint. Kaelor answered with control. Steel flashed through the burning chamber. Sareth drove Kaelor toward a fallen shelf. Ilyan tried to rise, but the poison crushed the air from his lungs. Sareth saw his weakness. He abandoned the fight and rushed toward Ilyan. Kaelor stepped between them. Saretha's sword entered Kaelor's side. Ilyan screamed his name. Kaelor caught Saretha's wrist before the blade could go deeper. You always choose him, Sareth whispered. Every time. Kaelor twisted the sword from Saretha's hand and struck him to the ground. Valar and his soldiers surrounded the Duke. Sareth looked toward Othriel, who had been carried into the doorway by 2 guards. Tell them, Sareth ordered. You gave every command. Othriel pressed one hand against his wounded side. Then he laughed bitterly. You promised me a throne and planned to bury me beneath it. He looked at Emperor Aldrin. Sareth supplied the poison. He forged the letters and ordered the attack on General Ravaryn. Everything is recorded inside the Black Ledger. Kaelor picked up the book from the floor and handed it to the Emperor. The evidence had survived the fire. Emperor Aldrin opened it. Duke Sareth, you are under arrest for treason. Valar dragged Sareth from the archives. The fire spread across the ceiling. Kaelor turned toward Ilyan, but Ilyan's vision had already begun to fade. Meleys knelt beside him. I need water and a clean cup. Erend found both while Kaelor lifted Ilyan into his arms. Meleys mixed the drops she had recovered with 2 powders from her bag. The liquid turned silver. I saved enough for 1 dose. Kaelor held the cup to Ilyan's lips. Drink. Ilyan tried, but his body would not respond. Kaelor's voice trembled. You said you would remain alive to hate me. I do not hate you. That was not our agreement. Kaelor carried him out of the burning room as Meleys poured the antidote into his mouth. The courtyard blurred above Ilyan. He felt Kaelor holding him. Then he felt nothing. When Ilyan opened his eyes, he was lying inside the Emperor's private chamber. Morning light covered the bed. Kaelor sat beside him with a fresh bandage around his waist. You keep waking with me beside your bed, he said. Ilyan touched his face to make certain he was real. You keep getting stabbed. I will try to find a less painful way to gain your attention. Ilyan pulled him closer and kissed him. Kaelor smiled against his lips. The poison? Ilyan asked. Gone. My father? Safe. The Emperor? Recovering. Sareth and Othriel? Sareth will stand trial. Othriel confessed in exchange for exile rather than execution. Ilyan released a long breath. They had survived. Yet one fear remained. The story said you would kill me 7 days after returning from war. Kaelor looked toward the clock. It has been 7 days. Ilyan's heart quickened. Midnight was only minutes away. What happens when the day ends? We begin the 8th. Kaelor took Ilyan's hand. The clock struck midnight. Nothing changed. Ilyan remained inside the room. His heart continued beating. Kaelor was still holding him. The ending written for them had finally lost its power. 3 months later, Emperor Aldrin publicly cleared Kaelor and Ilyan of every charge. Valar became commander of the Royal Guard, while Erend helped expose the remaining members of Saretha's conspiracy. The Emperor offered Kaelor any reward he desired. Kaelor requested only the freedom to return home with his husband. They renewed their marriage vows in the garden of the Ravaryn estate. There were no royal guests and no political agreements. Only the people they trusted stood beneath the white flowering trees. When it was time to speak, Kaelor looked directly into Ilyan's eyes. "I married you once to protect you," he said. "Today I marry you because you taught me that surviving is not the same as living." Ilyan held his hands. "I entered this marriage believing you were my destruction. You became the reason I fought for a future." Kaelor placed a silver ring on his finger. "Do you still fear I will kill you?" "Only when I insult your battle plans." "You insult all my battle plans. Then I remain in terrible danger." Their guests laughed. Kaelor drew him closer. "I will protect you from your reckless husband." Ilyan smiled. "He is not reckless. He is stubborn and dramatic, but I love him." Kaelor kissed him beneath the falling white petals. Ilyan never returned to the world he had left behind. Sometimes he wondered whether he had truly entered a novel, or recovered a life stolen by poison. The answer no longer mattered. The person he had been and the person he had become had chosen the same man. The doomed villain survived. The heartless war god fell first. And the marriage written to end in blood became the beginning of their forever. End of Part 8. And that is the end of Ilyan and Kaelor's story. A marriage destined to end in betrayal became a love strong enough to rewrite fate itself. But now I want to hear from you. When did you first realize that Kaelor had fallen in love with Ilyan? And what was your favorite moment between them? Share your thoughts in the comments because I would love to read your answers. If you enjoyed this story, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional BL romance stories, filled with danger secrets and unforgettable love. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your support means more than you know. Until our next story, take care, and remember that sometimes the ending written for us is only the beginning we choose for ourselves.